Have you ever looked around and wondered why so many seemingly good people, those who are kind, honest, and well-intentioned, struggle, stumble, or ultimately fail in their endeavors? Meanwhile, others, perhaps less outwardly virtuous, navigate the complexities of life with cunning and achieve remarkable success, sometimes even at the expense of others. It's a frustrating paradox, a question that can shake our faith in fairness and conventional morality. Why does this happen? Is being good a liability in a world that often seems indifferent or even hostile to pure virtue? The answer, according to the bold and often controversial Renaissance philosopher Niccolò Machiavelli, is a resounding and perhaps shocking yes, if that goodness is not tempered with a ruthless understanding of human nature and the true dynamics of power. This isn't an endorsement of cruelty or immorality for its own sake. Instead, it's an invitation to strip away our illusions and confront the often uncomfortable psychological and philosophical realities that govern success, survival, and influence in a complex world. Today, we're diving deep into the often misunderstood mind of Machiavelli, particularly the psychological and philosophical underpinnings of his infamous work, The Prince. We'll explore his argument that attempting to be an angel in a world that often ruled by beasts can not only lead to failure, but can be self-destructive. We'll uncover his pragmatic and at times unsettling lessons on when perceived cruelty might paradoxically be a form of mercy, and how a clear-eyed understanding of the evil, or perhaps more accurately, the self-interested and often irrational aspects of human nature, is crucial for anyone seeking not just to survive, but to achieve meaningful goals and even, in a Machiavellian sense, to do good effectively. Are you ready to abandon comfortable illusions and discover the psychological and philosophical rules that truly govern our world? So, let's begin by understanding why Machiavelli's insights, though centuries old, remain so relevant to the psychology of success and failure today. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for evil, he was a political realist, observing the world as it is, not as we might wish it to be. He saw that human beings are often driven by self-interest, fear, ambition, and are easily swayed by appearances. To ignore these psychological realities, he argued, is naive and dangerous for anyone in a position of leadership or anyone trying to effect change. From a psychological perspective, good people often fail because they misjudge human nature. They may operate on the assumption that others are as rational, altruistic, or principled as they are. Machiavelli would say this is a critical error. He believed people are more likely to be ungrateful, fickle, and deceitful when it serves their interests. Understanding this doesn't mean becoming cynical, but becoming more strategically aware. They prioritize idealism over pragmatism. Good intentions are not enough. Machiavelli stressed the importance of effectual truth, what actually works in the real world, over abstract ideals. A good person might fail because their virtuous approach is simply ineffective in a given situation, or because they refuse to employ necessary, if unsavory, tactics. They fear being perceived as bad. This fear can lead to indecisiveness, weakness, or a reluctance to make tough choices that, while unpopular, might be necessary for the greater good or for survival. Machiavelli argued that a leader must sometimes be willing to act in ways that are not conventionally good to preserve the state or achieve a vital objective, suggesting that appearing to be good is often more important than actually being good in all circumstances. Machiavelli's work is a study in political psychology. He understood that power relies on managing perceptions, understanding motivations, both noble and base, and being willing to act decisively based on a realistic assessment of human behavior, not just on idealistic principles. Now, let's turn to the philosophical implications. How does Machiavelli challenge our conventional notions of virtue, and what shocking lessons does he offer? Machiavelli's philosophy is often seen as a break from classical and Christian ethics, which emphasized virtues like justice, temperance, and piety as ends in themselves. For Machiavelli, the primary goal of a ruler, and by extension anyone seeking to achieve significant goals in a competitive world, is the acquisition and maintenance of power and stability. Virtues are valuable only insofar as they serve this end. The economy of violence or cruelty well used. This is one of his most controversial ideas. He argued that if cruelty is necessary, it should be swift, decisive, and done all at once to secure a situation, rather than drawn out, which only breeds resentment. The aim is to establish order and security, which can paradoxically be a form of mercy if it prevents greater prolonged suffering or chaos. This challenges the idea that all cruelty is inherently and equally bad. The intention and outcome matter. Is it better to be feared or loved? Machiavelli famously concluded it is safer to be feared than loved if one can be both. Love is fickle, dependent on goodwill. Fear is maintained by the dread of punishment. While he didn't advocate for needless cruelty, he saw fear as a more reliable instrument of control in a world where people are not inherently good. This is a stark lesson in the psychology of influence. The appearance of virtue. Machiavelli advised that a prince should appear to have all the good qualities, merciful, faithful, humane, religious, and upright, but must be mentally prepared to act contrary to them when necessity dictates. This highlights the psychological power of perception and reputation, and the pragmatic need for moral flexibility. It suggests that public virtue and private pragmatism might be necessary. These are not easy lessons. They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and the often brutal realities of power dynamics. It's not about becoming a ruthless tyrant, but about understanding that operating solely on idealistic notions of goodness without a keen psychological understanding of others and a willingness to be pragmatic can be a recipe for failure and even self-destruction. The good person who fails may be failing not because of their goodness, but because their goodness is unaccompanied by wisdom, adaptability, and a realistic understanding of the world. They may be trying to play by rules that their opponents ignore. So, how do we integrate these challenging Machiavellian insights without abandoning our own ethical core? This is where a nuanced understanding is crucial. 1. Cultivate psychological realism. Acknowledge that not everyone operates from a place of high virtue. Understand human motivations, self-interest, fear, ambition, without necessarily adopting them as your own primary drivers. This is about awareness, not emulation. 2. Strategic adaptability. Recognize that different situations and different people may require different approaches. The one-size-fits-all virtuous approach may not always be effective or even truly good in its outcome. This is the wisdom of the fox and the lion. 3. Understand power dynamics. Be aware of how power operates in your environment. This doesn't mean you need to become power-hungry, but understanding these dynamics can protect you from being manipulated or blindsided. 4. Pragmatic idealism. Hold on to your core values, but be pragmatic in how you pursue them. Sometimes achieving a greater good requires making difficult choices or temporary compromises that might feel uncomfortable. The key is to ensure these actions genuinely serve a justifiable ethical end. 5. Self-preservation as a foundation. Machiavelli understood that you cannot achieve any good if you are destroyed. Protecting yourself, your position, or your ability to act effectively is sometimes a necessary precursor to achieving virtuous goals. Machiavelli's lessons are indeed shocking if our view of the world is purely idealistic. He forces us to look at the shadows, both in human nature and in the means sometimes necessary to navigate a complex reality. For the good person to succeed and survive, and perhaps even to truly affect positive change, they may need to integrate a Machiavellian understanding of psychology and power, not to become evil, but to become more effective, resilient, and ultimately more impactful in a world that is far from simple. This is not a call to abandon morality, but to embrace a more robust, realistic, and psychologically informed approach to living and leading, understanding that sometimes the path to a greater good is paved with difficult, pragmatic choices.